Hello again, in day number 86. My name is Mary, and today's story is Samson. After Japheth, three judges ruled in turn, named Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. None of these were men of war, and in their days the land was quiet. But the people of Israel again began to worship idols, and as a punishment, God allowed them to fall under the power of their enemies. The seventh oppression was by far the hardest, the longest, and the most widely spread of any, for it was over all the tribes. It came from the Philistines as strong and warlike people who lived to the west of Israel on the plain beside the Great Sea. They worshipped an idol called Dagon, which had a fish's head on a man's. The Philistines took away all the Israelites' swords and spears, so they could not fight, and they robbed their hand of all the crops. So the people starved as before. The Israelites cried to the Lord, and the Lord heard their prayer. In the land of Dan, which was next to the country of the Philistines, lived a man named Manoah. One day, an angel came to his wife and said, "You shall have a son, and when he grows up, he will begin to save Israel from the land of the Philistines. But your son must never drink any wine or strong drink as long as he lives. And his hair must be allowed to grow long and must never be cut, for he shall be a Nazarite under a vow to the Lord." The child was born and was named Samson. He grew up to become the strongest man in the Bible. Samson was no general like Gideon or Japheth, calling out his people and leading them in war. He did much to set his people free, but all he did was by his own strength, without help from other men. When Samson became a young man, he went down to Timnath in the land of the Philistines. There he saw a young Philistine woman who he loved and wanted to marry. His father and mother were not pleased that he wanted to marry one of his people's enemies, but they did not know that God would make this marriage the means of bringing harm to the Philistines and help the Israelites. As Samson was going down to Timnath to see this young woman, a hungry young lion came down the mountain, growling and roaring. Samson seized the lion, tore him to pieces easily, and then went on his way. He made his visit and came home, but said nothing to anyone about the lion. And I will show you a picture of that. It says Samson killed the lion. And here it is. After a time, Samson went again to Timnath for his marriage to the Palestinian woman. On his way, he stopped to look at the dead lion, and in its body he found a swarm of bees and honey they had made. He took some of the honey, ate it as he walked, but told no one of it. At the wedding feast, which lasted a whole week, there were many Philistine young men. They amused one another with questions and riddles. I will give you a riddle, said Samson. If you answer it during the feast, I will give you 30 suits of clothing. And if you cannot answer it, then you must give me 30 suits of clothing. Let us hear your riddle, they said. And this was Samson's riddle for the young Philistines. Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. They could not find the answer, though. They tried to figure it out for 3 days. At last, they went to Samson's wife and said to her, Caucus your husband to tell you the answer. If you do not find it out, we will set your house on fire and burn you and all your people. Samson's wife urged him to tell her the answer. She cried and she pleaded with him and said, If you really loved me, you would not keep this a secret from me. At last, Samson yielded and told his wife how he had killed the lion and later found the honey in its body. She told her people, and just before the end of the feast, they came to Samson with the answer. They said, What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? Now Samson had to give them 30 suits of clothing. He went out among the Philistines, killed the first 30 he found, took off their clothes, and gave them to the guests at the feast. But all this made Samson very angry. He left his new wife and went home to his father's house, and the parents of his wife gave her to another man. But after a time, Samson's anger went away, and he went to Timnath to see his wife. Her father said to him, You went away angry, and I thought you didn't care for her. I gave her to another man, and now she is his wife. But here is her younger sister. You can take her for your wife instead. Samson would not take his wife's sister. He went out very angry, determined to do harm to the Philistines because they had cheated him. He caught all the wild foxes he could find until he had 300 of them. Then he tied them together in pairs by their tails. Between each pair of foxes, he tied a piece of dry wood, which he set on fire. Then he let the foxes loose in the Philistines' fields when the grain was ripe. They ran wildly over the fields, set the grain on fire, and burnt it along with the olive trees in the fields. When the Philistines saw their harvest destroyed, they said, Who has done this? People said, Samson did this because his wife was given to another man. The Philistines saw Samson's father-in-law as the cause of their loss. They came, set his house on fire, and burnt the man and the daughters Samson had married. Then Samson came down again, fought a company of Philistines, and killed them all as punishment for burning his wife. And that was the word of the Lord. Now, discussion questions. What was different about Samson? What was different about Samson? Number 2, how did Samson's parents feel when he wanted to marry a Palestinian woman? How did Samson's parents feel when he wanted to marry a Palestinian woman? Why? Why did the Philistine men want to know the answer to the riddle? How did Samson get the clothes he had promised to give them? Number 3, why did the Philistine man want to know the answer to the riddle? That was the first part. The second part, how did Samson get the clothes he had promised to give them? And that was the end of the questions as well. So thank you again for attending, viewing, and listening. May God bless us all until next time we meet again. Bye bye for now.